What's going on, everybody? My name is Sean O'Brien, and this is episode 6 of MakerHUB, a podcast focused on entrepreneurship, design thinking, and all things innovation. Today, I'm here with Robert Schluter, Vice President and CMO at Saddlemen and co-founder of American Cargo, two very successful motorcycle and lifestyle brands. He is also very deep in the social media space, not only with the two companies previously mentioned, but with his personal brand at Robert1117, where he has gained nearly 30,000 followers in a little over a year's time. Much like episode 3 with Andre Wise, I met Rob in the Instagram DMs, and we will discuss a little bit later why that is an important point to note. So without any further introduction, I'm super happy to have you here, Rob. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me, and hello to everybody out there.
So why Pittsburgh? And here we are sitting here in Pittsburgh. We met in Pittsburgh. I DM'd you out of the blue, not even knowing that you were from Pittsburgh. So what ties do you have here to Pittsburgh in the art space? And
Well, that's a great question. You know, I usually get odd looks whenever I mention I am from Pittsburgh. I've lived all over the country. I've lived in New York and Pittsburgh and Dallas, Texas, Portland, Oregon, LA. Early on in my career, I just went where the jobs took me. And as a design consultant, they were always in major cities. It wasn't until later in life that my wife and I started to have children, and our family is kind of scattered within a 200-mile radius of Pittsburgh. So it was just kind of the central location where we could visit everybody or they could visit us. And I went to college here for a little while, and I've always enjoyed the city. So it's a nice place, cost of living, culture. The city's a great place. So we'll be here for quite some time, I'm sure.
I know you're back and forth to California as well. And speaking on behalf of the cost of living, it's quite different. And understanding the reason to live in Pittsburgh solely for that reason is 100% understood.
Yes. I mean, nobody really likes taxes. And, in California, you're subject to a significantly greater amount of taxes than you are here in Pittsburgh. You trade off a little bit, as I look out the window today, it's snowing, and it's not exactly snowing in LA. So
that's very true. There are benefits here and there.
Yeah.
So did you go to school here in Pittsburgh?
I went to school for a little while here at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. I originally went to Syracuse University and then came here to the Art Institute because at the time they had a really good industrial design program. So I wanted to polish up my portfolio there and then jumped right into the workforce and got going.
So you're in the marketing space and you didn't go to school for marketing.
No.
So I think that's a point to be made in, the students who are going to school for marketing and how that really doesn't exactly play into your ability to market, right? And you've done a very good job at not only marketing yourself, but within your roles at these various companies. So what is the tie between design and marketing? Why design and marketing for you? And, how do you leverage those two things to get to where you are today?
Those are some great questions. Obviously I could speak for hours about those topics, but, I immediately think of something that was said to me early on in my education. A professor of mine had made a comment that, as professors and as educators, they can't teach you to have good ideas or craftsmanship or pride in your work. That's kind of something you need to bring to the table yourself. However, what they can do is help you communicate, and that comes in a lot of different forms. And I think that, as you talk about marketing or you talk about design, or anything in the business world for that matter, it really comes down to communication. If you have great ideas, your ability to communicate can make or break it. If someone can't immediately understand what it is that you want to convey to them, the world's time poor. Nobody wants to invest, or, the world is, not as a whole, but on average, somewhat selfish. And, their time is their time, and they treat it that way. And you have to be able to communicate very concisely and know what you want to communicate. I think a lot of times people get caught up in what they think somebody wants to hear, or, maybe they don't even clearly understand what it is that they want to communicate. And so without being able to do that, it's lost. And then that affects your ability to market, your ability to design, so many things. So really communication is probably the most important aspect.
I think that's interesting that you say that too, because in my, fairly short time, it's been about 8 months that I've been in industry as an engineering student. And the number one takeaway that I can say is that my ability to communicate has been the thing that my managers, my senior managers have been a fan of. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't even been my technical ability that has really put me above everyone else or everyone else relative, because, if I'm able to convey a certain thing that I'm trying to get done better than someone else, then we may not have a better idea, or I may not have a better idea. They may not have a better idea, but whoever can talk about it and communicate it better mm-hmm. is the person who will be granted, either whether it's money or whether it's time or whatever the metric may be. But it's super interesting that communication, above all else, above the thing that you spend 4 years studying at school, doesn't really matter if you can't communicate that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about competing for projects or for budgets or grants or any of that, the spoken word is powerful, but not nearly as powerful as pictures. And I think that's where marketing and design start to overlap each other, in that, quite often in early on in my career, design and marketing was spoken as graphic communication. And your ability to show somebody versus telling them is far more impactful. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, and as we move into today's technology, video is that times 34 frames a second or whatever you're shooting at. So with that and the unlimited technology that's available to us, you really have to be thoughtful about what it is you want to say, because, even in the design arena, or, if you're a fine artist, you practice for years to hone your skills to communicate or to technically be able to produce art. But then there's a tipping point or a point of realization in your career where you realize, well, now that I have this ability, what is it that I want to say? And not only that, but early on, before a lot of the technology, it was very labor intensive. A drawing in the past, like when I started as an industrial designer, to share how ancient I am, I guess, there wasn't computers. We would draw stuff by hand. And I remember as a young designer, I would spend, 18, 20 hours on a drawing, and it would get to the point where you would need to hand letter things. And you could destroy multiple hours worth of work by a typo. Simple, you're just copying things down, you write it incorrectly, you got to go back to zero. There's not an undo. You got to, come up with creative ways to fix it. So at that point, when you approach a concept or an idea, you really had to vet it out and say, if I'm going to invest 20 hours into this particular communication, I better be thoughtful about it. Whereas today with some of the technology, people are afforded the ability to just rapidly create ideations, and they skip past, the technical parts of, make sure that it's thoughtful and that's what they want to do. So it's definitely a challenge. I mean, people, if anything, it's like measure twice, cut once. Spend a little more time thinking about what you want to do and then execute it. And you see examples all over the place. Sometimes some of the best artists are not technically as skilled as some others, but they are able to communicate an idea. You look at cartoons versus fine art paintings. One's obviously thousands of hours invested. The other one might be an ink sketch on a napkin, but what that communicates could be powerful if it resonates with its audience. So.
Right. And I think one of the things I've seen too is because we're able to so rapidly ideate and so rapidly create, first iterations of products, we often overlook the actual manufacturing aspect. And that's a huge element that we can't overlook. But because we have all of these things around us, we don't really see that part of it anymore. That's almost immediately either outsourced, or we can't talk in that regard because we figure someone else might handle that. So we have to kind of start to really try to understand that aspect of it if we really want to bring a product to market. And I know you've brought many products to market and gone through those stages of product design. So what kind of tips of the trade do you have in taking a product from that initial drawing to market? I know you work with a lot of overseas manufacturers, and kind of what does that communication process look like? I know there's some difficulties in that for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, to kind of go back to the first part of that question and address that. As a designer, they fall into a couple categories. And for myself, I would put myself more in the control freak side of the equation. And with that, in order to see drawings or ideas that I have in my mind come to fruition or manifest themselves as an actual consumer product, you have to educate yourself about the manufacturing process as well. If you're sitting at home doodling in your sketchbook, that's one thing. You don't have to worry about budgets or manufacturing parameters or any of that kind of stuff. And you can have a lot of fun with it. However, if you are concerned about the picture you draw, making it all the way to a consumer's hands without losing any of its design appeal, aesthetics, or integrity, then you'd be better off knowing, or at least maybe just to, at a minimum, communicate with an engineering team and so forth. I mean, there's plenty of people that are experts in all sorts of fields that you can tap these days very easily. Reach out, ask them. Thanks to the internet, when I started, the internet wasn't nearly as robust as it is today. I could find out anything in 20 minutes between, the Google tools that are available or the ability to call anybody in the world, literally any time of the day, and speak to them through Skype or anything else, and it's just not very costly.
So how far in the process of product design can you get before you have to reach out to that technical either person or how much of the process can you handle yourself before you do have to reach out? Since you can learn most of the process on the internet, like you had just touched on.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with skill and experience. For somebody like myself, I can get to a solution much faster than somebody at a junior level who's just starting based on, I've ran around the racetrack enough times. So as a rule of, a basic guide maybe is when you start to get a little nervous, call somebody. Right. Even if they say, hey, you're fine, go ahead and proceed with it. It's better to reach out and ask early on, because if you go down a certain path, you're investing time, which equals money, a lot of times. And they can be costly. The bigger the project and the more ambitious, there might not even be experts available that, but at least you can get in the ballpark or have an educated guess as to kind of what you want to do and get the right people involved early on.
Right.
I was also very fortunate that one of my first career or design occupations was very heavily run by manufacturing. Design was kind of an extension of the manufacturing arm. And so everything was solution to budget. So as a designer, part of your evaluation at the end of each year was based on how close you adhered to budgets and so forth. And a few times you get passed over for a raise or something, you very quickly, start to connect the two. And instead of just running off drawing pretty pictures that a client signs off on, because the client says, hey, we'll just say hypothetically, I have $100. I'd like you to create this product. And you draw them something that's $1,000. Odds are it's $1,000 product that's going to be more desirable than the $100 option. So you win the business. The client has an expectation. Oh, that's awesome. That's the best thing I get for $100. And your manufacturing team says, well, that's $1,000. Now, who is it that has to go back to the client and explain to them that it was bait and switch, for, lack of a better description? And so, also at that first position, we'd have to go back and they would make us do it. Well, you sold it. You made the promise. Now you go explain your way through this. So, there's a lot of learnings kind of the hard way early on about being responsible with what you're doing. And, like I said, the opportunity to just ask and have experts available is very simple to achieve today. You got to be thoughtful about it and go out of your way to do it. And it's tough sometimes because, everybody wants to please the client and show them something spectacular. If I was a car designer and I worked at an economy class car and I was designing Lamborghinis and Ferraris, well, yeah, I'd look like a superstar. That's amazing. I want one of those. It's only $10,000. I'll take 10. And then the company says, well, we're going to be upside down in about 5 minutes if you continue down this path. So you have to go tell everybody they get a, economy car. And,
right.
it's rightly, priced and so forth.
So is it still better to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission in this case?
It really depends on your environment. There was times that I worked in places where it was about winning business. And as part of a new business development team, you would need to be specifically vague about how you presented your ideas. Not that you would deceive anybody, but there was ways and tricks that you can use to highlight certain functionalities, or you make it a little shinier, or, you modify lighting or colors, and it's still realistic. It's just more appealing, and you win the business because you're competing against other companies doing the same thing. And then there's other times that, you might work in-house at a company, and as a product designer, in order for you to provide more value to the company, relates to product margins and so forth. So you have to really, keep that in mind, that if you can design a product that looks like $1,000 and do it for $500 and everybody's happy, then the company makes money, the customer's happy, the client, everybody in the food chain is excited about it. Mm-hmm. But it really requires just, a decent amount of experience and, being thoughtful, because it does take a team. I have years of experience and I've built all sorts of things, but there's still a handful of engineers that I call all the time. Hey, let me send you a sketch, and it can be a text message from my phone of my sketchbook. Can you take a look at this and tell me what you think? Am I crazy, or do you think we can build something like this? And a lot of times it's just pushing the envelope on, hey, we did this last time, I was able to put my hands on it after we built some. I think we can push it a little further. What do you think? Or trying out new technologies or processes. And, and then also if you have a second or third opinion, those are other people that get called into the room with you when you're in trouble. Hey, this is really way off. Oh, well, the rest of the experts agreed with me too, so it's a little bit of, self-protection in a certain way that, and not so much to cover your ass, but just to provide that confidence so that you can focus on your important role. And that's creating something that is valuable and desirable for a consumer. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be the designer. I've seen lots of them earn bad reputations for themselves by designing that $1,000 object that's supposed to cost $100, and then they just hand it off and leave it in somebody else's lap. Well, I don't know, it wasn't my problem, and they walk away. And the other people become the promise keepers, and from a relationship standpoint, that can be really detrimental.
Right. How many iterations would you say does it take before you can get to a final stage of a product? And do you see low-level prototyping really play its role in the product designs that you've been a part of?
Yeah. I mean, those are really great questions, and it's very circumstantial. I would say that in my career of 15 years or so of designing consumer products, thousands of things out in the market today, there's probably only been 2 that ended up looking exactly as I drew them the first time. Mm-hmm. And for a whole host of different reasons. Sometimes a client, will deceive you and say they have $100 and they really only have 50. Or there might be timing constraints on something, that this has to be in market by X date, and you have to, everyone agrees this is the way they want it to look, but then you find out manufacturing can't deliver, or there's some sort of other supply issues. So there's so many variables, but, in general, for most things that, not as complicated as a car, but let's just say something that's at the level of a piece of furniture, or, something like a tripod or a general consumer product, like anything you could find in Target, for example, is probably a year development cycle.
Okay.
And a lot of things aren't really new, even the next iPhone isn't new. Right. The first one probably took 3 to 5 years to develop. Mm-hmm. But then once they kind of had a system, it's refining it at that point until the next evolutionary jump takes place. And, that's more time consuming.
Right. And it's interesting to learn about the design process and how long that time frame really is, because when you think about as new technologies are introduced, they've had to been around for a good bit of time before the actual product was released. So what technologies are really out there now, and thinking about the fact that we have these technologies, it's just the ability to implement and the ability to create a product with the correct implementation over the correct amount of time. And there's all these different metrics that play into, a product that we don't think about. We just buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and there's a lot of different ways that happens as well. Sometimes, I'll travel to a factory or a third-party manufacturer of ours, and when I get there, they have their R&D guys will bring out an entire table or, bins of stuff that, hey, we've been working on this cool new stuff. We have no idea what to do with it. It's just cool and we can make it. Mm-hmm. And you sit there and you play with it, and sometimes you have ideas. Oh, wow, this would be fantastic. Other times, it's a box of garbage and you're like, I can't do anything with this, But if you get enough of that and you have enough exposure to different manufacturers and their capabilities, sometimes things just organically kind of combine in your mind and you're like, wow, that would be fantastic. And to jump back a little bit to the earlier question about the time involved, the other part of the equation is testing of products and prototypes, which is a huge variable. Sometimes, like right now, we have a new coating that we're going to put on some materials, which is really new. And, all of the chemical companies who have developed it, they give their, stamp of approval and their warranty for longevity on it. But the way that they designed it wasn't the application that we're using it for. So this is really kind of new. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that we're the first to market with it. But at the same time, we don't want to rush it and overpromise and then have to eat hundreds of thousands of returns or product failures and things like that. So again, that's where you get the experts together and you do as much testing as you can. But at some point, in the technology world, they do it quite frequently. Like, just release it, we'll deal with the problems later, which is much easier when it's a digital product because, hey, I can email you an update. We can do the bug fixes, in line. It's not a problem. When you're manufacturing physical goods and you have a recall or something else, it could be catastrophic.
Right.
So that can play a big part in the whole development cycle, as well as testing it to the point where everybody that has a stake in the game has approved that it's going to work the way that we expect it to. Right.
I think there are some certain trade-offs to being first to market and being second to market. So what are your takes on being first to market and not having the best finalized product, but being the first ones out there, or being the second follow-up product to market, but being refined and ready to go and is the consumer's choice? Which is the better case scenario?
It depends on what you want to achieve. Being first is paramount. Many people can follow up with a better product later and never supersede the front runner or the innovator in that category. There's plenty of examples that could be cited in it. So if you want the prestige, we'll just take the very simple Coke versus Pepsi. Pepsi will never supersede Coca-Cola. Never, a million years, unless Coca-Cola, something happens to them where they just kill themselves and go out of business. Pepsi will always be number two. Now, in blind taste tests, people say Pepsi's way better, and Coke even tried to change their formula. It's not what it's about. It's about taking mind share with the consumer and being the original and being first. If you can stake out that ground, you will reap the benefits for the longevity of your company. Usually the only way that those people lose first place is if they crash themselves out. Now, second place from a business standpoint is not a bad position to be in. I mean, I haven't looked at any numbers in the last day or two, but Pepsi is not a company that, they're not doing too bad.
Right.
Are they doing as good as Coke? No. But much like pop music versus alternative music, they're just demographics in the market. So if you're looking to have a company and you don't care about the prestige of being first place, and you don't want to, reap the benefits of first place, second place is still awesome to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And third place, in most company profiles and statistics that I've read, first place is second place is roughly 2/3 of first place. That's as big as they can get. Third place is 2/3 of second place. And then everybody else combined doesn't equal third place. So, and it's pretty accurate across the board in regards of industry, if it's rental cars or it's drinks or, whatever it is. I mean, even look at Red Bull. Red Bull's a great example. Monster will never supersede Red Bull. And then who's behind them? Rockstar.
Mm-hmm.
And then how many billions of other energy drinks are out there that, for that guy who owns that company, he probably makes enough to feed his family and give everybody in his family a job. And, they got a boat and a house in Tahoe or whatever. But it's not Red Bull money.
Right.
And Monster, they did their own thing, but they'll never be Red Bull because Red Bull was first. Coca-Cola was first. So to answer your question, first place is incredibly important. If you want to be the first place guy.
Mm-hmm.
If you just want to go into business, make some money, it's a great strategy to just look at somebody that's first place and try and get into second.
Right.
And just dovetail in, be different, but basically do everything that first place is. And you could be really set.
Right. I think that's super interesting. I actually did a tier energy drink comparison. I actually did a cost comparison to caffeine content comparison, and Rockstar did not win in any direct comparison contest, and they're really expensive when you compare them. Mm-hmm. And it really just comes down to brand image. And I asked people who drink Rockstar or who drink Red Bull why they drink Red Bull, and it's just because, well, that's what my friend drinks, or that's what this person drinks, or that's what this person, you know what I mean? And it's it just really comes down to brand image. And you don't think about that as a consumer until you look at why you're buying things.
Right. Well, and that goes back to the first place positioning. As human beings in a very time poor environment, if you think about what it would take to really research and make an educated decision about everything that takes place in your life. Which energy drink am I going to drink out of the cooler? What kind of gas am I going to put in my car? Which shoe do I tie for? I mean, what brand of, there's so many decisions that would take place. The human brain is just set up to make assumptions and to default to the group. Mm-hmm. So first place, once you get first place, it's like social media, and we can talk about that later, but it's a snowball effect. Once you're in first place, you get a key positioning. Once you're in the key position, then it just piles on to that. And people with limited time look around and make an assessment. Oh, that party on the left side of the street is bigger than the party on the right side of the street. I want to go to a good party. What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. You're going to go to the one with more people, right? Because they've, there's some social proof that that's obviously the place to be. Now, when you trace it back to the very beginning, it was just because one party had 2 people and the other party had 1. I mean, it started out at some point in time that close.
Right.
But it snowballs, and it's just a cumulative effect where when you're in first, you get all the victories of being in first and the accolades of it. And then, you get your super advocates that, like you said earlier, they don't even know why. They're just like, that's my brand because they're number one and I'm number one and they're original and I'm like that and my buddy drinks it, and they go down that path, and then it affects the next person and the next person.
And it's funny to watch the stubbornness to not switch from a brand for no particular reason other than the fact that that's what they've done for the past however many years or months or whatever the case may be.
Well, and there's also the defectors, and that's what makes up the alternative group. If we say pop versus alternative music, you have, well, everybody's doing that and I'm different, so this is my brand. Red Bull versus Monster. Red Bull is action sports and Monster is extreme action sport. Oh, it's even crazier, so it's a darker, more aggressive spin on it. And then Rockstar says, okay, well, what's left that's still relative? Okay, we'll take out the music aspect of it. So those 3 combined carve out 95% of the market. Mm-hmm. And the other ones are just, you drink it because you're either somebody who's like, oh, it was the only thing available, or they were giving it away for free, or my buddy Jim started this company and I'm supporting him.
Right.
But beyond that, you're just going to go to, and all those things, even the shelf space you have at retail, the way that you work out distribution deals with every gas station and C-store in the country. And, it's primary positioning. You go in there and it reinforces Coca-Cola's first. Oh, okay, great. And then Red Bull, and all those things.
So as we talk about brand, I want to switch over and talk about your brand.
Okay.
So once again, at Robert1117 on Instagram. And I'm not even sure you can answer this. Is this your only form of personal branding? This is the only one that I know of. But maybe touch a little bit on why that Instagram page started, and how it wasn't even really, to my understanding, it wasn't even really meant to get to where it is today, but was more of an outlet.
Yeah, there was a few factors that kind of played into it. I manage all of the social media from a high level within, the brands that I manage. And so there was a need to have a personal account because it's difficult to answer or to do research in the social environment when you carry around all the baggage of being a big brand. If I stop by your page as a major company or brand, it's very odd. You're like, well, why did they contact me? This is awkward. So the ability to navigate around the social environment required that I needed my own profiles, which I wasn't interested in having, pictures of my kids and family and that kind of thing. So it was probably commonly referred to as a burner account. It's just set up. It's, there for useful purposes, but it's not really a reflection of me personally. So I'd use it here and there. And then, I really just kind of went dormant. And then, over the years, I've always just enjoyed drawing cars. And there was also some marketing experiments that I wanted to run related to people's response to colors, people's response to shapes, composition, just some other things that, again, I couldn't test in a market under the brand's name because it was just too risky. If it went wrong, that I'd have to erase it and go backwards. So it was really a platform to experiment with things that I wanted to use for the brands. And what I had at hand was hard drives of car pictures that I've drawn in my spare time when my kids go to bed or I'm sitting on the conference call and I'm not really involved in it. There's many of those. So I just started uploading the pictures and, before I knew it, people seemed to like it. So it was just continue to do it. And, like you had mentioned earlier, it's gone from 0 to close to 30,000 in about a year and a half. So, and there's been tons of opportunities. I mean, above and beyond the normal professional ones that I have with all sorts of very interesting companies and people that I've been able to work with. And it's quite exciting. I mean, social media provides a platform these days that is unlike anything in the past for artists, especially.
Right. And I think it's interesting, because of how we met through an Instagram DM of, to your point of there were no pictures of you. There were no pictures of anything related to who you actually were as a person. It was here's my craft. And if something interests you, if you want to just talk, if that opportunity was out there for zero cost. If you didn't respond, I didn't lose out on anything, but it turned out that you did. And I want to touch on the Instagram DM in particular about in regards to a form of communication to people who you may not have been able to reach otherwise. I think, you look at, even I've seen Mark Cuban respond in the DMs to people who have created real opportunities, and these are large, people who have big platforms who in a million years you would never think that they'd respond, but you reach out with the right angle, with the right purpose, and you see these guys responding. So how, one of the things during our phone call prior to this podcast, you had mentioned communicating with people through a side door instead of just walking through the front door, which through the front door previously was maybe email or was maybe even writing a letter or knocking on the front door. And I don't think that that's the appropriate way to go about things nowadays. So how does Instagram really create that new outlet or provide a new way to kind of get someone's attention without even really maybe even meaning to?
Yeah. I mean, those are all really good points, and to speak to one of them first, if you would have tried to contact me as my professional position through calling my company or speaking to there's numerous firewalls that insulate me from the average person just walking up and knocking on the door. Mm-hmm. I screen my calls. I have assistants that do that for me from a professional standpoint. Whereas Instagram was something that at the time, and still is, it's off the record kind of stuff. That's just my own personal ones. And, there's a lot of people that send me DMs that I don't get to. But when I do find that I have some time, I try to be diligent about reading them, responding to the ones. A lot of them are, young artists that are, looking for tips and pointers and, thoughts on schools that they should go to or the value of it and so forth. So it's still, it's new enough that all of the scourge has yet to move in, and I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but when I got my very first email account, it was exciting because the only people that had your email address were friends, family. They were important emails that you were receiving. Fast forward to today, and I have spam filters that cut out I don't know how many emails, and then the ones that pass, I still delete 50 to 100 emails a day that are completely irrelevant solicitations for stuff that I'm not interested in.
Right.
And Instagram will probably become that way over time. You've seen the evolution with like Facebook. Early on, Facebook was just for friends and family, and then they had to monetize it, and now it's a lot of ads.
Right.
So all of that stuff will happen, but right now it's still at a state where you can take advantage of some of those things, and it is really, it's a great forum again for creative people. Like Instagram specifically is very heavily skewed creative networking right now. There's a lot of photographers that I find and use for my companies, that they just have a great page. They take great photos, and that's really all that matters. Even when I hire people and look at things, and I feel bad for some people that spend an absorbent amount of time making resumes, or I honestly don't even care. I can tell at this point within a few minutes whether or not you have the creative ability to succeed in my company.
Right.
And that's just 2 pictures. That's all I need, And a lot of times I think people make the mistake of trying to show everything that they've ever done in their whole life. And nobody has time for it. And quite often it paints a more negative picture than just showing one amazing thing. And then the expectation is, well, if you did that, you can do more amazing stuff.
Right.
You're graded quite often on the lowest common denominator in the group, and I think that plays into why some people struggle on some of those platforms like Instagram, is because they feel compelled to show everything, and even on my page, I don't show pictures of my family or my kids or my dog or, which I love all of them and they're dear to me, but the people that follow my page don't give a shit about any of that. It's like watching a TV channel or television channel or any other thing. They want the best of that specific thing because you can cater it to be the feed that you want, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you like cars or car art, you add me into your feed and that's it. But if I started showing pictures of my dog, I might have the cutest dog in the world, but you're like, there's another guy that's got a cuter dog out there and all he does is take dog pictures of that dog that I like. So I'm going to follow him for dogs and this guy for cars and this person for that, unless you're a Kardashian or, Jay-Z or somebody like that, where there's other reasons that you're able to post that kind of stuff, but if you're just an average person and you want to build an Instagram following or any other kind of branding thing, there's no reason to do all of that. Just pick one thing that people care about or you do best and just do that consistently and you'll see it grow.
Right. So what do you say to the young creative or the young artist who really wants to make a name for themselves? There's so many outlets to get your work out there, but what is the most streamlined process to, really get yourself out there and make a name for yourself with the art or whatever your creative is, what's the best way to get that out there today?
Well, I mean, today there's more opportunities than there's ever been. You know, in the old days, you'd have to, you know, there'd be multiple gatekeepers, be it a gallery owner or, you know, some sort of publication that you need to get recognized by and endorsed by. Now you can go straight to the public and bypass all that. So it's incredibly valuable. In order to be successful in that, in my opinion, it goes back to communication. You have to understand what it is you're trying to communicate. Doesn't matter if you make hand-woven rugs or, you know, you glue popsicle sticks together or whatever your thing is. Just do that. Do it consistently and try and master your craft and be, you know, whatever it is, even if it's gluing popsicle sticks together, based on the fact the whole world's connected, even if it's a small demographic, there might be 1 million people on planet Earth that are connected to the internet that love popsicle sticks. And you could be the king of that if you just focus on that. But if you try and do that and then also say, oh, and by the way, I also paint houses and I build furniture and here's a picture of my cat, you're not going to be the king of popsicle land.
Right.
You've got to just be focused on that, communicate those things. And, you know, also sharing too. You know, I think a lot of times people fail because they're too focused on the rewards for themselves, you know. And I could be wrong, but for my page, you know, I try and communicate with everybody. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of young artists and other people. I remember being in that position and not knowing the answers to things. And, you know, there's no harm in helping somebody else get a little further along, you know, and if you do that, you know, people will come back. You know, if you can, without asking for anything in exchange, if you can provide some knowledge or some assistance, then people find that valuable. And so if you can master your craft and provide value to people, I think you'll see great things happen.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, if you're focused on the short-term reward, like a hamster, you know, with the little crack cocaine button and I need another like, that's really focusing on the wrong results.
Right.
You know, if you focus on, hey, I want to be the best popsicle stick maker, and you spend 8 hours doing that and you post one picture once a month, you could still have a fantastic following.
Right.
You know, I mean, I don't spend that much time on Instagram. I know other people, you can watch YouTube videos and other things. Oh, if you do this and this trick and that trick and you do all these things, anybody that leads you down the path of there's an instant, easy button trick, it's probably not true. You know, it's the fundamentals, you know, focus on what it is you're doing, communicate it properly, provide value, and you'll see your numbers grow. I mean, I spend no more than a half an hour each day on Instagram. And for that investment, you know, it's grown. And when you look at my artwork, it's not technically superior to, there's millions of people on there that do great stuff. I mean, the community of talented artists is huge.
Right.
I just do it consistently and I stay focused on the specific thing that I do. And the people that like it follow and they tell their friends. And if they like it, they do too. And it just grows.
Right. Giving without any expectation for anything in return is 100% the way to, number one, gain relationships, and number two, become a well-liked person in whatever your creative field may be. And I found I've even taken it, I've gotten myself to a point which it has gotten me way more opportunities than I ever would have expected. But I've gotten to the point where it's like, you know, if I ask my friend who I've helped numerous times for a favor and they say no, I'm not hurt for an instant because I've never expected anything back from them. And if that answer is a no, well, if I never expected anything, then I can't be hurt by it, right? So like always putting yourself on the side of winning in all of the situations that you've been in or are going to be in, I think is just the way to manage it. And of course, emotions are going to get in the way of that at some point. But if you're able to push that aside and really just focus on what you're trying to do, it's crazy how that mentality really, really pushes you forward.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's really, you know, the circumstances are always the same. The thing that changes is your perception of them and how you view that situation. You know, there's There's people that say, oh, I'm in a bad mood because it's cold. Well, there's people that live in Antarctica that, they're cold all the time.
Right.
You think they're in a bad mood all the time? They're not. Right. So it's not that. Even, if somebody kisses you, and you're super excited about it. Well, it's not about the circumstance of, flesh pressing against flesh. Like if that was true, you'd be just as excited when your dog kissed you. And that's not, so it's not that the actual circumstance, it's that you thought, oh, wow, I really like this person and they like me and they proved it by kissing me. So it's really your perception, like you were saying. So if you go into it where, you honestly want to help people when you can, and, and there's not always the ability to help people. Some people, you can assist them, but they don't want to help themselves. And, you can't let that slow you down either.
Right.
You got to continue to just stay focused and, provide value where you can. And, it makes you feel good. And honestly, it's just a better state of living to be in that, and I think that for myself, a lot of that, has been learned over the years. I wasn't born with that kind of instinct.
Right.
I come from a very low income family and environment growing up where a lot of that stuff was counterintuitive. It was kind of a dog eat dog world.
Right.
And it wasn't until through further education on my own that, and experiences that I started to change my perspective. And, it's really helped me a lot in life. And I would encourage anybody to, continue to read and educate themselves because it's a common message amongst probably some of the most successful people in the world.
Right. Right. So at what point as a young creative, can you get to the point where you can give, right? Like you're not always at the point where you can give or have enough to give. So I want to get your thoughts on working for free as a young creative. And I know that that's definitely a touchy subject with things such as Fiverr out there. I'm not sure about your familiarity with the platform, and that's definitely a love it or hate it position that I found with a lot of young creatives. So what was your early stage development of your creative kind of skill set, and did that include working for free, and what's your take on working for free in the early stages?
Well, I would reframe that a little bit, and I'll kind of go into the details why. I don't think anyone should ever work for free. Your time is valuable. It's something that you can't ever get back. But free is relative to, a lot of things. So, and why I'm kind of going down this path is that, early on in my career and even today, I do things that a lot of people view as you're doing that for free. However, my perspective, and going back to like we were talking earlier about your state of mind, is sometimes you get experience that you wouldn't have had if you would have been passed over for the opportunity had you tried to charge monetary for it. So a lot of times you can get education, you can get experience, especially in the design world, because, I can draw a picture. There's a million guys that can draw a picture. But if I say, hey, I'd love to get involved in this project, I'd be willing to do it for free. And somebody else says, well, that's really cool. I'll just spend my entire budget to build it. Then together you get the experience, the process of going through it. At the end, you have an actual product that you can put in your portfolio or talk about the experience. You get to see it come to fruition. And that's incredibly important. I mean, I look back on, my early days and some of the things that I did and, all of my peers. My very first job, I graduated from school and I was offered, I had quit my job my last semester of school, took all of my money, poured it into my portfolio, and I had literally just enough money to survive for 2 weeks after graduation. I was eating salami sandwiches with mustard for every meal for 2 weeks. But before that, upon graduation, I was offered a job, and it was, I had multiple options, but the one that was going to pay me the most, I just took it. I didn't haggle over price or anything. This sounds great to me. You're going to pay me. Let's go do this. And a lot of people thought I was crazy. Oh, you should have renegotiated. You could have got more money. I didn't care. I had a job. I got a paycheck. I could stop eating salami sandwiches. And, fast forward today, the eagerness to jump in and really work on things and do it without concerning yourself with the monetary aspects. Every one of those peers today, I easily make 6 to 10 times more money than they do. And it's not because I set out to focus on, I'm going to get paid for this one day. This is exciting to me. I genuinely want to do it. I know that it's going to help me with experience, education. So I put my all into it. And over time, people witness that and they see you, I want that guy to work on this stuff. He does great stuff. He's really easy to work with. And then they tell a friend and they tell a friend. And, before you know it, you've got a long line of people. And then you can be selective and say, well, if there's 100 people that want me to be involved, now I can start to pick and choose a little bit, and help where I can. But if you're always screening people for what is going to monetarily benefit you right out of the gate, you're just limiting a lot of, options. And I know it's tough. I mean, when I was eating salami sandwiches, I would have loved to have had some, person walk in and throw money at me. But, you got to make those judgment calls while you're there, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's always remembering your initial intent for doing whatever you were doing in the first place. And I think that, in your going back to that story, if those early stages of eating salami sandwiches, if you weren't doing what you actually liked doing, then you wouldn't have been able to get through that phase as easily. And just remembering the fact that you went into this situation knowing that it was going to be hard in the first place, and that any situation that you took on or any challenge that you took on was going to benefit you either way, whether it be learning or whether it be meeting new people or whatever the case may be. There was some positive going to come out of it. And of course that worked out for you. And I think people kind of get stuck in whatever that short term, if the short term doesn't work out, then they're not able to see that big picture. What did they really go into this either industry or whatever the case may be? What did they go into that industry for?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think some people get confused when, there's a lot of talk about, if you just do what you like, you'll be happy for the rest of your life, which, to some degree is true. But I think there's some caveats that go with that, you have to really like what you're doing to get through the hard parts of it. There's inevitably, you start something new and you don't know anything about it and you get super excited. You're like, wow, I just picked up a pencil and I made a picture. That's amazing. And so you went from 0 to 60 in a split second. But then the next 5 years, you might see no progress at all. So if you don't like it, you might give up and go do something else because you're like, hey, I want to get that instant satisfaction of going from 0 to 60 again. But if you like it enough and you value it enough and you stick with it, you'll make it through that plateau and get to the next level. And then, if you've broken through enough levels, you start to have an appreciation for where you are in those situations. And, the bigger and more experienced you become, the bigger your projects do. When I was a young designer, there was a short window. It was very rapid. I designed this week. It's getting built next week. It's going to be out in the world 3 months from now. And I've moved from designing individual products to now designing companies and organizations and, very large ecosystems of design that they're now planned in 5-year and 10-year increments. And if you don't have the patience and you don't love it and you don't stay focused on why you're doing it, it's very easy in the fog of war to, get confused or disillusioned or, some days you lost the battle.
Right.
But to go back in the next day and understand, what the things you need to do are in order to win the war and why you're fighting the war in the first place is,
right.
And then that's, I don't know if that comes from just experience or age or whatever, but, I know that's definitely not the mindset I had when I was 20.
Right.
It was entirely different then. But luckily in the hard times, I loved what I did enough to carry me through and just have faith in it and just keep doing it.
Right. All right. I know we're running short on time here. So, just to wrap up, number one, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. I think we had a good conversation here. Number two, is there anything that you want to plug or any last minute anything? There's the camera there. Is there anything that you want to tell the students or tell the audience, or that you really have on your mind today, or anything?
No, I mean, I don't think I have anything to plug. If you like car art, obviously go follow my Instagram page. There's tons of cool stuff on there. I'm always available to chat, and you can talk to me or go through you and be in contact with me. I'm always interested in helping young people that have exciting things going on.
Mm-hmm.
But since most of your audience is still in school, probably the most relative thing that I could share that's helped me immensely beyond, standardized education. When I went through school, a lot of the professors and other stuff, were very successful and educated for their time. But we're going through, the information revolution, so to speak, and it's every bit as transforming as the industrial or the agricultural revolution was. It's changing every minute, and the professors and the other people, despite all their experience, it's not relative to today's market. So it would really advantage everybody to just continue to get out there on the front lines, experiment, learn. There's millions of books. I mean, I don't know how much money I spend on Amazon books and late fees at the library and other stuff. It's all there. I mean, even just through Google or any other, internet connection, go pursue what you want to find out about and learn about. And if you do that, there's tons of opportunity that emerge every day. And I can't even speculate as to what it's going to be like next week. It's so different.
Right.
So just follow what it is you're interested in and do your homework and work hard at it. And, I'm sure everybody will be successful. So I just hope that in our discussions here, there was something useful that people can take away from it and maybe advantage them a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Rob.
Yeah, thank you.